Episode 5: A Taste of Home. The desert wind howled over the massive, hardened dome of baking soda, carrying with it the profound, unmistakable scent of a giant salt and vinegar potato chip. Kaito Sato stood frozen, his hand still resting on the exposed obsidian pipe. The metallic serial number gleamed under the harsh sun of the Fang-Reich steppes, but it was the words beneath it that made Kaito's soul leave his body and take a brief, panicked vacation. Property of Omega Corp, Tokyo, manufactured 2016. No. Kaito whispered, his eyes wide, his slender frame trembling with a horror far deeper than the manticore. No, no, no! I got hit by a truck. I woke up in a meadow. I learned magic grocery shopping. This is a fantasy world. You don't get reincarnated into a subsidiary. Mika, currently covered head to toe in a thick crust of white, neutralized foam, crunched her way over to him. Her wolf ears were plastered flat against her head with dried baking soda, and every time she moved her tail, a cloud of white dust poofed into the air. Manager human, her nose wrinkling at the sharp tang of the vinegar. Why are you staring at the demon rock, and why do I smell like a side dish? Ilara floated over, having managed to keep most of the chemical explosion off her emerald robes by hiding behind a very confused Nori. The giant emerald drake was currently licking a patch of the hardened foam and looking highly disappointed that it wasn't a giant meringue. "What is this Omega Corp?" Ilara asked, leaning on her staff and peering at the metal plate. She narrowed her emerald eyes. "Is it an ancient deity of your people? A demon lord of the Tokyo realm?" "Worse," Kaito gasped, clutching his head. "It's a multinational conglomerate with a really aggressive real estate division. Ilara, my old company was bought out by Omega Corp. They make everything from microchips to industrial plumbing. Are you telling me the magical world-ending drought is just a corporate plumbing leak?" Before Kaito could spiral further into a localized existential crisis, the net grocery interface exploded with a golden, blinding light that nearly knocked him backward. A series of notifications fired off like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. System notification. Major threat neutralized. Target, Manticore of the Black Spring, Employee of the Month. Rating, Overkill. Chemical warfare. Reward, 5 million yen and level up. Current level, 15. New ability unlocked, wholesale distributor. Unlock bulk purchasing and commercial grade logistics. Kaito's jaw dropped. 5 million yen. He was rich. He was astronomically, obscenely, tax-free rich. Mika leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the glowing numbers. "Is that a lot of your invisible spirit coins?" His voice trembling with the sheer, unadulterated power of a fully funded procurement budget. "Mika, with this much yen, I could buy the steps. I could buy the sanctum. I could buy a franchise." "Good," Mika growled, grabbing Kaito by his rugged khaki collar and lifting him slightly off the ground, a cloud of baking soda puffing into his face. "Before we go hunting for this demon lord Omega, we are going to my village. The drought may be stopped, but my people are still starving, and you, manager of meats, have a very large tab to pay." The journey deeper into the steppes was tense, mostly because Nori had figured out he could carry them flying low to the ground, and Kyle was terrified of falling off a dragon with no seatbelts. As they crested a dusty ridge, the Fang-Reich settlement came into view. It was a sprawling camp of heavy leather tents and massive bleached bone structures, sitting in the shadow of a dried riverbed. The atmosphere was incredibly bleak. Gaunt beastfolk warriors patrolled the perimeter with drooping ears, their armor hanging loose on starving frames. Pups cried softly in the shade. When Mika dropped down from Nori's back, the village guards raised their spears, only to lower them in absolute bewilderment at the sight of their fiercest vanguard smelling strongly of a fish and chips shop. An elder beastfolk, his fur entirely gray and his face scarred from 100 battles, stepped out of the largest tent. He looked at Mika, then at the regal high elf, then at the giant emerald dragon, and finally at Kaito, a slender Japanese man in a very dusty jacket. "Mika," the elder rasped, his voice weak, "you return without a hunt, and you bring a soft skin? A priestess? Have we fallen so far that we invite our enemies to our funeral?" Mika stepped forward, her tail held high, despite the crusty baking soda. "Elder Torin, I did not bring a hunt. The Black Spring is sealed. The waters will return. And until they do," she gestured grandly to Kaito, "I have brought the god of the larder, the manager of the harvest, the summoner of the Wagyu." The entire village went dead silent. 100 starving beastfolk stared at Kaito. "Mika, please don't call me that," Kaito hissed, blushing furiously. "Prove it," Elder Torin challenged, his eyes narrowing. "Our bellies are empty, human. Magic cannot summon true meat. It is a law of Aethelgard." "Yeah, well, I don't follow local ordinances," Kaito muttered, cracking his knuckles. The corporate trauma of the pipe was forgotten. This was a logistics crisis, and I was the project manager. "Step back, everyone. Synergy check. Ilara, I need ambient lighting. Mika, crowd control. Nori, do not eat the inventory." Kaito swiped his hand through the air, his fingers dancing across the interface with the speed of a concert pianist. He activated his new wholesale distributor perk. "Transaction initiated. Fang-Reich feast protocol. Items: 10 commercial drum smokers, 500 kilograms premium tomahawk steaks, 200 kilograms pork belly, 50 sacks of koshihikari curry rice, 100 iter tonkosu broth, 50 kilograms gula aren. Tax applied, 0 yen. Overridden. Total, 850,000 yen. With a series of deafening metallic crashes that made the village guards scream and draw their weapons, 10 massive black steel smoker grills materialized in the center of the camp. Mountains of vacuum-sealed, heavily marbled meat dropped onto folding tables. Sacks of rice stacked themselves like sandbags. "What sorcery is this?" Elder Torin bellowed, taking a step back as Kaito summoned 5 commercial rice cookers and plugged them into a magically synthesized generator. "It's not sorcery, it's supply chain management," Kaito roared, the adrenaline of a 5-star kitchen taking over. It was absolute edge-of-the-seat culinary chaos. Kaito was a blur. He was flipping 50 tomahawk steaks at once, the flames roaring into the sky as the fat rendered and hit the coals. He was tossing pork belly into massive woks, caramelizing them with rich, dark gula aren and soy sauce. The smell of roasting garlic, high-grade beef, and sweet smoke hit the starving village like a physical shockwave. Beastfolk who hadn't stood up in days were suddenly clawing their way toward the cooking line, their eyes wide, their mouths watering uncontrollably. "Line up, single file, nobody pushes the chef," Mika barked, acting as the fiercest bouncer a barbecue had ever seen, though a line of drool was actively leaking from the corner of her mouth. Ilara stood on a boulder, using her staff to cast beautiful, shimmering emerald lights over the feast, giving the dusty camp the ambiance of a high-end Tokyo beer garden. "Patience, beasts," Ilara called, secretly holding a plate behind her that already had 3 steaks on it. Kaito was in the zone. He was serving up mountains of fluffy white rice topped with glistening smoky meat, pouring rich tonkosu broth into bowls for the pups. The village erupted in cheers, tears of joy, and the sounds of ferocious, unapologetic eating. Elder Torin took one bite of a caramelized pork belly slice. The hardened, stoic leader of the steppes fell to his knees, openly weeping into his rice bowl. By the ancestors, it is so tender. The umami, it speaks to my soul. Don't cry, eat, Kaito yelled, throwing another 50 steaks onto the grill. We've got 5 million yen to burn and a demon corporation to hunt. Eat up, Fang-Reich. As the village partied into the night, the flames of the grills illuminating the steps, Elder Torin approached Kaito to return a serving tray. But as the elder handed it back, his eyes locked onto the bottom of the summoned stainless steel tray. He gasped, dropping it in the dirt. Struck into the metal was the same logo, Omega Corp. Torin looked up at Kaito, his eyes wide with ancient terror. Manager Kaito, where did you get this mark? This is the rune of the Skyfall, the mark of the gods who broke the world 1,000 years ago. The massive barbecue gradually slowed from a frantic, high-stakes catering sprint into a warm, utterly contented food coma. Across the Fang-Reich settlement, beast-folk warriors were sprawled on the dusty ground, clutching their swollen stomachs with expressions of absolute tear-stained bliss. Even the guard patrols had traded their spears for leftover tomahawk bones, gnawing on the smoked marrow under the light of the Aethelgard moons. By the largest campfire, Elder Torin sat with Kaito, Ilara, and Mika. The old wolf's fur was slick with meat sweat, and a profound respect shone in his ancient eyes. Elder, Kaito began, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. The adrenaline of the cookout was fading, replaced by the gnawing mystery of the Black Spring. Before we neutralized the corruption, I found a metal plate on the pipe beneath the dunes. It had a word on it, a name from my world, Omega. Elder Torin's ears flattened instantly, the warmth of the fire seemingly failing to reach him. He looked around, as if the shadows themselves might be listening. The forbidden syllable, Torin rasped, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It is the story told by my ancestors for millennia, passed down from alpha to alpha since the time before. We call it the Skyfall. The old beastfolk tossed a pinch of dried herbs into the fire, making the flames burn a vivid, unnatural blue. The legends say that 1,000 years ago, the gods of metal and glass descended from the heavens. They did not come to bless the earth, but to strip it. They built towering monuments of gray stone that pierced the clouds, and they drank the mana of the world through black, venomous veins, like the pipe you sealed today. Torin looked Kaito squarely in the eye. The ancestors fought them, the Sylvan Sanctum fought them, and in the end, the world broke. The Omega gods vanished, leaving behind only ruins, rusted metal, and the localized curses like the sorrow mist. To speak their name is to invite the rust back into your blood. Kaito stared into the blue flames. His old employer hadn't just bought his software company. They had apparently tried to buy a whole dimension and run it into the ground. The corporate greed of Omega Corp was so vast it had transcended reality itself. I'm going to find them, Kaito said, his voice stripped of his usual shy hesitation. I don't care if they're gods or just a bunch of relocated board members. They poisoned your home, and they ruined mine. I'm going to find out the why of Omega Corp in this world. Ilara placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her silver braids catching the firelight, while Mika gave a fierce, approving grunt. The next morning, Kaito didn't wait for the sun to fully rise before going to work. The drought was broken, but the village's food supply was still entirely dependent on his inventory. Kaito knew true logistics meant sustainability, not just endless handouts. All right, Fang-Reich, Kaito clapped his hands, his project manager persona taking full control. We have 4 million yen in the budget, and we are going to implement a rapid deployment agricultural infrastructure. Let's get this dirt working for us. He swiped open the Wholesale Distributor tab. Transaction initiated. Fang-Reich Agricultural Revitalization. Items: 100 sacks of high-yield wheat seeds, 50 sacks of root vegetable seeds, 10 commercial tilling machines, mana-converted, 200 bags of rapid-growth organic fertilizer. Total, 1,200,000 yen. What followed was the most aggressively efficient farming montage the steppes had ever seen. Kaito summoned heavy-duty tillers, teaching the bewildered but enthusiastic beastfolk how to operate the machinery. They carved deep, perfectly straight furrows into the newly softened earth near the dried riverbed, which was already beginning to seep with fresh, clean water from the deep aquifers. Kaito was everywhere at once, checking soil pH levels with summoned testing kits, coordinating watering schedules, and dumping massive bags of high-grade fertilizer. Alara used her sylvan magic to coax the seeds, her emerald's light acting as a catalyst for the rapid growth nutrients, while Mika and the Vanguard physically hauled the heavy equipment with their immense strength. By late afternoon, the barren patch of dirt had been transformed into a massive, organized grid of sprouting green shoots. It was a miracle of modern agriculture and high magic synergy. That evening, to celebrate the successful planting, Kaito decided it was time to cash in on the group's KPI bonus. He set up a large wooden table near the sprouting fields and summoned the ultimate indulgence, Japanese strawberry shortcake. He didn't skimp on the quality. He summoned hyper-fluffy sponge cake, perfectly stabilized Hokkaido fresh cream, and massive ruby-red strawberries that smelled like pure, condensed summer. When he set the delicate, beautiful slices down, the atmosphere at the table immediately turned into a war zone. "Manager human," Mika purred, her tail swishing in wide, happy arcs as she abandoned all predatory dignity. She leaned across the table, batting her eyelashes in a way that looked highly unnatural for a wolf warrior. "This shortcake, it is so soft. My hands are too tired from tilling the fields. Perhaps the great chef could feed his loyal vanguard?" Ilara slammed her fork down, her regal composure fracturing instantly. "Do not fall for her feral tricks," the elf hissed, her emerald eyes flashing with intense, sugary jealousy. "She eats raw meat off the bone. She cannot appreciate the delicate structural integrity of the sponge. I have the refined palate of the sanctum. Clearly, my slice requires your personal explanation up close." "I can appreciate a sponge," Mika snarled, baring her fangs at the elf. "I'll bite your refined palate off." "Ladies, please, there's enough cake for everyone," Kaito stammered, his face flushing bright red as Ilara grabbed his left arm and Mika latched onto his right. "Feed me the strawberry, Kaito," Ilara demanded, pulling him toward her. "No, the chef belongs to the steppes," Mika countered, tugging him the other way. As he was literally caught in a tug-of-war between a beautiful high elf and a fierce beastfolk warrior over a plate of dessert, Kaito stopped struggling. He looked into the towering, ridiculous slice of cake. He looked at the sprouting fields of green in the distance. He listened to the laughter and full-bellied snores of the village around him. In Tokyo, his life had been a silent gray countdown. He had worked merely to exist, suffocating under the weight of concrete and a broken relationship, completely forgetting how to actually live. Before the truck hit him, he had made a desperate vow to see the sky, to find out what life was like outside the spreadsheet. Sitting here, covered in flour, exhausted from farming, and being cheerfully fought over by his friends, Kaito smiled, a genuine, wide, and utterly stress-free smile. "I'm doing it," he thought, taking a bite of the sweet cream. "I'm actually enjoying my life." The morning sun over the Fang-Reich steppes didn't arrive with a gentle glow. It announced itself with a blazing golden heat that baked the newly tilled earth. Kaito Sato, whose internal clock was still permanently synchronized to Tokyo rush hour, was awake long before the rest of the village. He sat cross-legged at the entrance of his heavy leather guest tent, his rugged khaki jacket draped over his shoulders as the cool morning breeze fought a losing battle against the rising sun. In his hands, he held a steaming paper cup of freshly brewed Taraja drip coffee, summoned tax-free from the net grocery interface. As Kaito took a sip of the rich, dark roast, the heavy flap of the tent was pushed aside. Elder Toran stood there, his scarred, gray-furred face looking far more rested than it had in months. "Manager Kaito," the elder rumbled softly, dipping his head in a respectful, ancient greeting. "The fields have taken root. The waters of the riverbed run clear. You have given my people a tomorrow." "Morning, Elder," Kaito replied, offering a shy, tired smile as he gestured to a woven mat. "It was a team effort. You should thank the fertilizer just as much as me." Taran stepped into the tent, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Suddenly, the old beast folk froze. His ears swiveled forward and his jaw went slack. In the back of the tent, piled atop a massive heap of summoned futons and blankets, lay Alara and Mika. The sugar crash from the towering Japanese strawberry shortcake had hit them both with the force of a physical blow. The fierce beastfolk vanguard was currently snoring loudly, her mouth slightly open, while her thick, expressive tail was draped casually over Alara's face. The regal high elf priestess of the Sylvan Sanctum, far from her usual divine dignity, had her arms wrapped securely around Mika's leg like it was a body pillow, a tiny string of drool escaping the corner of her mouth. "By the ancestors!" Taran whispered, his voice trembling with a profound, almost religious awe. "A high priestess of the sanctum and a vanguard of the Fang-Reich sharing a den, sleeping as one pack. I have lived 70 winters, and I never thought I would see such synergy." He turned to Kaito, his eyes shining. "You do not just summon food, Manager Human. You summon peace. You are a bridge between worlds." Kaito took a slow sip of his coffee. "I'm not a bridge," he thought dryly. "I'm just a guy who knows that a mutual food coma is the ultimate equalizer." "Elder," Kaito said, gently steering the conversation away from his accidental diplomatic victory. "Last night, you mentioned the Skyfall. You recognized the Omega Corp logo on the pipe." Taran's expression darkened instantly. The warmth of the morning seemed to vanish from his eyes. He reached into the folds of his heavy leather robes and pulled out a long cylindrical bone tube capped with hardened wax. With trembling claws, he broke the seal and carefully slid out a rolled-up piece of material. It wasn't parchment. It wasn't animal hide. As Taran unrolled it on the woven mat, Kaito's breath caught in his throat. It was a drafting paper, old, yellowed, and heavily weathered, but unmistakably modern, heavy-duty architectural vellum. "The previous alpha of our tribe found this during a deep scavenge. Many years ago, before the drought, he ventured far to the north, beyond the steppes, to the roots of Mount Kuragana, the Black Iron Peak. Beneath the mountain lies a dungeon of smooth, gray stone that is cold to the touch. He found this artifact in a room filled with dead glass eyes." Kaito set his coffee down, his hands suddenly shaking. He leaned over the paper. It was a blueprint. The intricate isometric lines detailed a massive, towering structure of steel columns, elevator shafts, and glass facades. It was a skyscraper, an impossible alien monolith that had no place in a world of elves, dragons, and magic. But it was the bottom right corner that made Kaito's blood run entirely cold. There, stamped in faded blue ink, was the interlocking gear logo of Omega Corp, and right beneath it, scribbled in sharp, precise Japanese kanji, was an approval signature and a name: Tenji Mori, lead architect and co-founder. "Oh my God," Kaito breathed, falling back onto his hands. The air in the tent felt suffocating. "You know this rune?" Taran asked, his ears flattening. "I know the man. I was a little boy back then," Kaito whispered, his mind racing back to his life in Tokyo, to the endless gray hours spent staring at news broadcasts on the subway monitors. Kenji Mori. He was one of the most famous architects in Japan, a visionary. He co-founded Omega Corp's structural division, and then, 4 years later, he just vanished without a trace. The police thought it was corporate espionage or a flight from embezzlement charges. It was on every channel for months. Kaito looked from the blueprint to the sprawling ancient steps outside the tent. The implications were staggering, terrifying, and utterly reality-breaking. Kenji Mori hadn't fled to a non-extradition country. He had fled to another dimension, and he had brought Omega Corp with him. If he's here, if Omega Corp has been here for 1,000 years, or if time moves differently, Kaito muttered, his logical programmer's brain trying to compile a code that was fundamentally broken. The drought, the pipes, the black spring, it's all connected to this blueprint. It's connected to Tokyo. It's connected to Omega Corp. Kaito stood up, his slender frame suddenly filled with a tense electric resolve. He looked at the weathered paper. He had died on a crosswalk in Shibuya to escape the crushing gray machinery of corporate life, only to find that the machinery had followed him to paradise. "Elder," Kaito said, his voice hard and decisive, "I'm going to Mount Kurogane. If my old world is poisoning yours, I'm going to find the source. I'm going to find the answers." A sudden rustle of blankets behind them made both men jump. Mika sat up, her wild hair looking like a bird's nest of dark fur and lint. She rubbed her eyes, then smacked her lips, still tasting the lingering sweetness of the gula aran and strawberry cream. "You are going to a dungeon of gray stone?" Mika yawned, stretching her toned arms until her joints popped. She grabbed her serrated daggers from the floor. "The vanguard goes where the manager goes, especially if there are going to be travel snacks." Elara sat up next, gracefully pushing Mika's heavy tail off her lap. She brushed her silver-braided hair out of her face, her emerald eyes instantly sharpened as she looked at Kaito's serious expression. "A high priestess of the sanctum does not shy away from the shadows of the Omega gods," said Elara smoothly, standing up and adjusting her robes with her usual regal dignity. "Besides, Kaito Sato, you possess the survival instincts of a startled rabbit. You would undoubtedly be eaten by a cave troll before you even found the entrance. We are coming with you." Kaito looked at the fierce beast folk and the elegant high elf, both of them ready to walk into the abyss just because he asked. He offered a sly, genuine smile. "All right, pack up. Let's go audit a dungeon."